Morning, everybody. So here we go, another Honest RC review. Let's get into it. This is one I've been wanting to do for a while. And now, seeing as how I've had this sitting here for a bit, obviously I've run her a bunch, had some fun. So let's get into it. The good old Tamiya Clodbuster. Now here's a truck that hasn't really lost its luster over the years. This thing is still relevant to today, and people still love these things. You can still find them too. Tamiya has re-released these as the Super Clodbuster, which this is. The originals on the front, instead of this 4x4x4, used to have the Chevy logo there, and it used to say Chevrolet on the tailgate, which it no longer does, because Tamiya lost the licensing rights to using the K10 body that these were using back in the day. So now, they didn't change the body, of course. They just took the Chevrolet off the back, and instead of the Chevy emblem, it now says 4x4x4 on the front. So, that's really the only difference between the Super Clodbuster and the original Clodbuster. Everything else is essentially the same thing. Still the same chassis, same suspension bits, same style of steering, same ginormous 160mm wheels. These things are massive, and they're awesome. Motor over axle, front and rear. Front and rear wheel steering, servo mounted in the middle. Single ESC. Nowadays, these used to be with a mechanical speed control that, some people still run the mechanical speed controls for some reason. I guess the old school or period correct is appealing to some, but mine came with a nice quick run dual ESC. So yeah, I prefer modern electronics myself to the vintage stuff. Just a little bit more trustworthy. A lot less of the oh, my truck took off and now I gotta chase it down with the modern equipment. So starting off with the pros of the Clodbuster, parts are still available, and parts are still relatively cheap because they've been re-released. With that, however, comes a caveat. Nothing has really changed. They haven't really updated anything on these models since they were re-released, or since they were released, really. You can find upgrades for these things everywhere. Well, not everywhere anymore. There used to be a bunch of aftermarket chassis you could pick up for these things. Shocks are interchangeable no matter what. You can change shocks on just about anything and everything, but there really isn't much in the way of improvements that have been made to this chassis that I know of, unless you spend big money and get the Clodzilla chassis or Sassy chassis, the aluminum chassis that are made by the several different companies. But trying to find one of those is like finding a diamond in the rough. They are very expensive if you do find one. So a lot of people just resort to making their own. They just take a piece of aluminum, bend it up to kind of match the original chassis, and call it a day. I say just leave the chassis alone, because if you're really going to modify a Clodbuster, you can do some crazy stuff with it, especially if you modify it with a Everest 10, like I did here with my Frankenbuster. It's a Clodbuster chassis, Red Cat Everest 10 driveline and chassis mounted to that chassis, and Red Cat ground pounder axles. So yeah, you can still do some massive modifications to these things without the the high dollar parts. They're still pretty easy to work on, which that goes into the pros as well. Is that they are pretty easy to work on. The one steering servo on this is mounted in the middle. It's 3 or 4 screws up top to remove the plate that covers it, and where the ESC is mounted, and it gives you full access. Now with that, here comes one of the cons. One of the cons is with a single steering servo in the middle, there's a lot of play because of the way the steering is set up. Now that servo pushes and pulls these 2 rods, one going to the front and one going to the back, and that feeds into this little gizmo here. Causes the steering to be very lackadaisical. Now there are a couple upgrades you can do. There's bumper mounts for steering servos. You can mount servos right to the axle, so that way you don't have to use this, and you can use 2 single servos, one on the front, one on the rear. That'll give you not only access to 4-wheel steering, but you can also crab walk with that. Whereas right now on this stock setup you cannot. It's 4-wheel steering all the time, which isn't a bad thing, but like on my Frankenbuster, I can just do the front wheel steer, I could do just the rear wheel steering, I can crab walk, and I can do 4-wheel steering. So that's you can do that if you have a receiver with more channels and a remote with more channels, so you can operate all those individually. Or you can just have them set up to where it's either crab walk. Like right now, my Frankenbuster is set up to just crab walk and 4-wheel steer. I don't have anything else set up to where the front or rear wheel steering, because it's a monster truck. It should only be, I use it for monster truck things, so 4-wheel steering and crab walking is all I do with it. Now this one is eventually going to get those upgrades. I'm going to print myself some new front bumper with the axles, the axle mounts for the servos, so I can put a servo on each axle, and stop using just the one in the center, so that way the steering is better. Because right now the steering is very lackadaisical. If I were to plug a battery in right now and steer full right, this is about as far as it would go, when in reality it can go even further. But just the way the steering is set up on these originally, it's not that strong. It's enough to get the job done, but there are upgrades you can make. Now the second con that a lot of people point out with these old Clodbusters is they are very, very 80s. That's what you get for suspension movement. Whereas on something like my Ruckus here, 2-wheel drive ECX Ruckus, we've got a lot more suspension movement and travel, and yeah. So that's one of the big things that people point out, is the suspension is very lackluster as well on these things. But it's goofy and it's adorable watching these things bounce around and do all sorts of small jumps and crushing cars, and it kind of brings you back to the old school monster truck days, where you would just see a lifted normal looking pickup truck with these big ass tractor tires, and they would just pop up over cars, and it would be something just as goofy as this. So throw on your rose-tinted glasses for these things, because they deserve some love. Now, I will say the only other real con with the Super Clodbuster is the price. I mean, they're still semi-reasonable priced. I mean, Tamiya, their prices are all over the place, because they do have a lot of really good entry-level price trucks, and then they have some more intermediately priced trucks like these. You can find the Super Clod kits anywhere from like Horizon Hobby. Most local hobby shops carry these, because most shops carry Tamiya, and you can find them on online retailers, Amazon, anywhere between like $270 if they're on sale, or like $350 for a kit brand new. But they don't come, you have to assemble them, They don't come ready to run, and they don't come with a remote receiver. They do come with motors, and I believe they do come with an ESC now as well, and a single servo. But you still have to provide your own remote receiver, and you got to assemble it, which it's not hard to assemble these things. They're pretty straightforward and simple, but a lot of people who may only be looking to get into the hobby, this might not be a first truck for you, because it's very labor intensive, and some people just can't stick it out for, the hassle, air quotes, the hassle of putting it together. Overall, I love these trucks. I've wanted to have a original Clodbuster in my collection for so long, and it's a re-release, but it's still a bone stock Clodbuster. So, I mean, it's close enough to an original as I can get without, like, breaking the bank. And these things are awesome. Personally, I want to give this a 10 out of 10 because these things are awesome and I love them. But they do have flaws that a lot of newcomers might not be able to handle or overcome easily without getting frustrated and possibly quitting the hobby altogether, or, really just saying, fuck this, and I'm going to buy a Traxxas ready to run and become a Traxxas fanboy or an Arrma fanboy. So, realistically, I got to give these things about a 7-star rating out of 10. Even though personally these are a 10 out of 10 for me. I just got to be real. They're not for everybody, but if you want a goofy, bouncy monster truck that can do cool monster truck things and look awesome doing it, here's your truck. So thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and if you like this kind of stuff, hit that subscribe button. Really helps out. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below or message me directly on any of the social media links that I will be putting in the description below. If you want your own Clodbuster, I will also be putting a link to Amazon where you can get one. And stick around. I got some more stuff coming up pretty soon. Enjoy, everybody.